Hi, my name is Laurie Trupp, and I am a friend of Kasia's who owns Open Door Tea Room. And we've been friends for many years, sharing our love of health and herbs and tea and other, as well as other things. I am a yoga teacher as well as an amateur gardener. Especially love herbs, and I have given lectures on herbs. I worked at Gilbert's Herb Gardens for about 5 years, and it truly is one of my favorite topics. So today we're going to be talking about tea, herbs for making tea. And I'm going to give you a little tour around my gardens, and we'll talk about some of the herbs that are growing that would be good for tea. The first herb that we're going to talk about is lavender. The lavender, you would use the flowers. These are not quite ready for harvesting. I am going to just pick a little clump so that we have it for our tea. They're still a little bit immature, but lavender is just a beautiful, tender perennial. It is pretty easy to grow, and you can see the height of it is about 12 to 18 inches, and it is a tender perennial, so sometimes you have to protect it from the bitter cold and wind. It's not always hardy and doesn't always definitely come back the next year, but I have luck. It's sort of a protected yard here, especially up against the fence and rocks, so mine has lasted for many years actually. And of course it just gets fuller and fuller the longer that you grow it. So this herb is called fennel. It's different than the fennel, the bulb fennel that are sometimes used, especially in Italian cooking. This is the herb fennel. And I actually have two varieties. I have a bronze fennel that is down in my other garden, but this is your traditional green fennel. You can use the leaves or the seeds for tea. It has a very like a licorice anise flavor. I like to use both the leaves as well as the seeds. You would, if you're using the seeds, you would pick them before they start to shake out. You have to get them when they're mature, yet not falling to the ground. So I'm going to clip some of this fresh. We're going to use it, and it's especially good fresh before it seeds, before it goes to flower, because then it kind of changes the flavor of the leaf. So this is a perennial. You can see how tall it grows. It's also really pretty in bouquets and arrangements because it's so feathery. It's one of my favorite herbs. I'm going to start with sweet marjoram. There are many varieties of marjoram. I like to grow the sweet marjoram. To me, it has really the sweetest flavor and wonderful medicinal properties, and definitely a sweeter flavor when with the sweet variety. The scent of it is really beautiful, and it is a perennial, very easy to grow, very hardy. Comes back all the time, just gets fuller. In a couple of years, I would actually divide this and give it, some to friends because of its hardiness. It just gets fuller. It grows very similar to oregano. Some people confuse oregano and marjoram. They're very similar, like spicy tastes. So yeah, it's one of my favorites, is sweet marjoram. And I'm going to move right on to talking about sage. I actually have several varieties of sage. The ones up here in this garden is the Bergarten, which is a German. It's a beautiful, almost a rounder leaf for the Bergarten sage. So I'm going to snip some. We're going to add to our tea a little later. Very pungent, very strong, almost a earthy, minty, very pungent scent to sage. I also have gray sage here, so I'm gonna put some gray sage. A little bit of a longer leaf with the gray, and we're gonna add that to our mix. And then finally, here in this garden, I have also thyme, different varieties of thyme. I happen to love lemon thyme. So I grow a lot of lemon thyme, but I also have just original thyme here, the English variety. So we're gonna clip some. I like to make culinary herb wreaths as well in the fall, so I grow lots of rosemary, thyme, lavender, sage. Those are all wonderful herbs to have an abundance of because they make really neat herb wreaths in the fall. So, take a look at this. Two varieties. So that's thyme, and we're going to move on down the garden to chamomile. This chamomile is a perennial. It kind of comes back every year, and it's a little bit of a taller variety. There's different varieties. Some chamomiles are annuals. This one happens to be a perennial. So I'm gonna flip some. They have a little like yellow button in the flower, and then the leaves are radiate off, and it's the flower, especially the flower head that you're going to use for your tea. You pop that off, and the white petals, when they dry, kind of curl into the yellow button. So sometimes you can't even see the white petals. You just kind of see the little button ball. And when they're dried, but they're like a little tiny daisy. So that is chamomile. Next herb is one of my absolute favorites. It's lemon balm. And it's extremely hardy, very lemony, it's almost like a lemon mint, but it's got a very, very strong lemon flavor. It grows pretty high. I like to clip the leaves. I use the leaves in my tea, and I clip them before they go to flower. They just kind of get a bit more bitter and stronger once it's gone to flower. You can harvest it several times if you just keep clipping it back, and it'll just keep growing all summer. It also self-sows, so it is an herb that I like to give away to friends, and it's just a beautiful, very lemon, one of the strongest lemon. It's also called Melissa. So we'll put our lemon balm on the tray, and then we're going to move right over to our mints. I have different mints here in my garden. Mints I always plant in a pot because they're very aggressive growers, and they send runners under the ground out to other areas of the garden. So if you don't contain it in a pot, you'll have mint everywhere the following year. Actually, even this summer, it would travel and spread. So I have 4 different types of mint here in containers in my garden. This one is your traditional peppermint, very strong and spicy. Another favorite, just a sweeter. I always feel like spearmint is a little sweeter than peppermint. Peppermint to me is very strongly medicinal and like has a more medicinal flavor, where spearmint is just really pleasant. And also, another mint that I have here is orange mint. I really encourage you to grow different varieties of mint because each one has its own characteristic and flavor. This is really a nice light orange mint. And then the last one I have is called golden ginger mint. That's over here. It grows low and sort of cascades, and depending on the amount of sun it gets, it'll turn either more golden color, more yellow, or more green. So that the variety can change color depending on the sun it gets. So this herb is called Anise Hyssop. It was originally used by the Native Americans. It is one of my favorite herbs. It has a very licorice, minty, and anise flavor to it, with really showy lavender flowers later in the summer. It's a wonderful addition to teas, and it comes back every year. It self-sows, and it likes full sun. It'll grow a lot taller. It grows about 3 feet tall, and it's a real beauty in the garden, and it tastes really good in tea as well. And then the last, back to fennel that I showed you up in my top garden. This is another variety called bronze fennel. Also really showy, feathery leaves that also will go to seed. And it has almost like a curly, ferny frond that kind of curls up out of it. So it's really pretty as well as really tasty. Again, that fennel is an anise flavor.
Thank you, Laurie, for all this wonderful tour and great knowledge. Now, let's use these beautiful herbs into the tea, into the very healthy, wonderful drink that we can never really have the same taste in the winter or when we're using the dry blends. So basically, peppermint, if you're not allergic, if you're not having any issues with using, is a very nice to blend with all of those herbs. It goes very well with the anise, with hyssop, with the lemon balm, with chamomile. So what is really not very necessary to look for the ratios, but try to experiment and do your own blends. Like you could make a tea based on the hot water. I usually love to use anise hyssop or anise, mint, always mint, little bit of sage. Sage is very grounding and but also very strong. So usually like one leaf is enough for this for the tea. And our chamomile, they're so beautiful. And like Laurie said, we use just the flowers. They would make visually this drink so enjoyable. That it's wonderful to have a break, perfect for tea time for yourself or with the company. Another thing, the lavender is also very powerful, just like sage, so you do not need to use a lot. And there are some wonderful blends that we sell with lavender, our sleepy time, our antiviral, and now you could try to have a similar with the herbs from your garden. So look at this. This is so inviting, and you can use later by pouring through the strainer to the teacups or mugs. Also, it is wonderful to do it individual. You could use the stainless steel infusers if you don't like to have the straining later. But I like to see the leaves. I think it's a part of the joy of this summer tea that is only available to us for this 3 months. And kind of like Marjoram, thyme, those are like very good for the immune system. We can use them all year round to boost immunity, to prevent microbes and fungus. And if you use individual mugs, I encourage you to use, I'm using the same water to not go in. So encourage you to use the glass because it's always more joy to see how the leaves are furling. You can also use regular jars and fill them up with herbs, put the hot water, and you can steep it actually a little longer and make the delicious iced tea later. So there is many wonderful herbs in Laurie's iced tea. They are actually floating here, different leaves, and it definitely enhances the flavor. So thank you very much for joining us.